Thank you so much for having me here today. It's great to be in Madison. I have a lot of experience with this town, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. I was in China, as Brent mentioned, with my daughter who graduated. She's a Badger. She graduated about 7 or 8 years ago and is in the business world, and we went to China as part of the Global Leadership Forum to speak at several universities there. And I had the privilege of being with my 30-year-old daughter, and she was really like a rock star, because in China, it's a very patriarchal society. This isn't my talk, but a very patriarchal society. So they're not used to father-daughter relationships, especially in the business world. And so we would we were part of a larger group, and we would all stand up and introduce ourselves. And I would normally introduce myself as one of the first two or three to be introduced. And then we saved Claire for last, and she would introduce herself. I'm Claire Wyatt, and she would talk about her business, and she'd say, and by the way, that's my dad. And every room we were in just exploded. People just went wild. And so you always, I don't know, where you are kids-wise for a lot of you guys, but I always was proud to be to have Claire known as my daughter, and now the tables have turned, and I'm known as her dad. So great, it's great to be here. You know, I entered the business world on February 1st of 1985. So one lesson I've learned in the last 32 years is that without leadership, nothing happens. Yet what I'm most qualified to write on, and I do, and speak on, and teach on, is not success, but failure. Being that I'm a 32-year overnight success, I've seen more failure than success. And somebody said to me the other day that you're going to get about 9 no's for every 1 yes you have in life, and that kind of goes with the business world as well. At least I've become comfortable with failure. I'm not afraid of it anymore. I'm not afraid to try new things, and if they don't work, what I've learned is that failure is really the pathway to success in life at the end of the day. You see, I look at success quite differently today than I did 32 years ago when I was a young guy just coming out of the University of Minnesota. It's now about fullness of life, being what God made me to be. As Bob Buford wrote in his great book, Halftime, for me now it's moving rather from success to significance. I really don't want this talk to be about me, though. I didn't drive all the way here to tell you about me, but I think you need to know how I got here. So, who am I? Or as the typical person will ask you as the typical guy will ask you, what do you do? And the more obvious question is, why am I here? And what have I done that qualifies me to stand before you today while you're eating your lunch and tell you about why I'm here? Leading with Power website announced that I was going to be your speaker, described me as a CEO and a motivational speaker. Well, one was true, and the other I'll just leave up to you. You can fill it in on the comment cards. That's a lot of pressure. But so my resume looks like this. From 79 to 82, I was at the University of Wisconsin at Madison. You heard of that place. I partied out. And after a 45-minute one-way conversation with my dad in the spring of my junior year, where he did all the talking, and I think I said yes, sir, about 17 times, I transferred to the University of Minnesota, where I graduated in 1984 with a bachelor's degree in agricultural economics and history. I was going to be a grain trader on the Chicago Board of Trade. But my dad took me aside after I graduated and said, "You've not learned anything that's going to help you at the Chicago Board of Trade. In fact, let me tell you that that is a cruel environment. And he said, I want you to go do something, go sell something on straight commission for a year and learn what makes the world go around. He said, I don't want you to sell cars. I'm like, that's great. He said, I don't want you to sell car stereos or life insurance. I want you to sell something business to business, straight commission. I'm like, well, what does that mean, straight commission? It means you don't eat unless you sell. And so I went on to work for Entree Computer Systems. It was the first year that IBM, if you remember, took all of their PC sales out of IBM corporate and put them in 5 VARs, value-added resellers. And I worked for actually 2 of those in a year. I worked for Entree Computer Systems and then Amerisource Business Services. They were run by IBM people. So for all practical purposes, we were trained as IBM salesmen. We went to IBM sales school. We could wear any color suit we wanted as long as it was navy blue. We could wear any color shirt we wanted as long as it was white. We could wear any color shoes we wanted as long as they were black, and any tie that we liked as long as it was a red and blue rep tie. And then I won't go into the haircut, and you even had to get a manicure, guys. You don't know this. They don't talk about this. But you were strongly encouraged to get a manicure because, you know, when you're showing a computer, your hands need to be nice. And they had a standard, but they didn't talk about that. And we don't talk about that in guys' groups. Anyway, so I did that for a year and then realized I didn't want to spend my life as a straight commission salesman, starting again at the beginning of every month. And so I went on and got hired by an investment management firm called Investment Advisors. It was the 17th largest institutional money management firm in the country. More about that later. I was there, carried the briefcase of the CEO for 8 years and learned the business. And then left there on November 1st of 1993 and started a company called Cornerstone Capital Management. It was started as a private wealth management firm and was that for its first 10 years before we transitioned it into a institutional asset management firm. We managed mutual funds and pension funds of large organizations and states and Taft-Hartley union plans and so forth. And so this is where I spent the core of my professional life at Cornerstone. And as Brent mentioned, that came to an end for me at the end of February of this year, and now I'm on to Act 2. But in 23 years, Cornerstone grew as a firm from 0 assets, and I was the first employee, 0 assets, to managing over $16 billion in assets. We had 3 investment teams, and a trading operation and a large operational group, 2 offices, Minneapolis and New York. And I spent the last 5 years up until the end of summer of 16 commuting back and forth to Minneapolis and New York every week. So folks who live in New York tend to have very long commutes, and nobody could complain to me because mine was the farthest. I came from Minneapolis every Monday morning. But so in 2012, we had, as Brent mentioned, we agreed to sell the firm. We did a reverse merger with a platform investment firm of New York Life. I became the CEO of the combined firm, and the rest is history. But now that time has passed. March 1st of this year, I began Chapter 2. It's been outlined. I'm just beginning to write it. I'm just getting started. It's a fun thing to have taken all the experience. But if I boil down this last 30 years into one lesson, it would be, as I said, without leadership, nothing happens. And as Winston Churchill said, history is about individuals who have made it and the leaders who have led it. I don't care who you are or what you're doing, you're a leader. If you're in this room, you're a leader. You're leading someone, whether it might just be yourself or your family or your business, you're a leader. And I've learned leadership has three primary characteristics. First of all, it's relevant. Second of all, it's real. And third of all, it's relational. You know what? I forgot that this was here. I brought this. So this is all I care about on the presentation. This is first things first. That's Luann and I. And don't I look great with a beard? So I looked like that last night, and because I was getting a head start in Movember. And at 10 o'clock, Lou walks in the bathroom, and she said, "You're going to shave tomorrow, aren't you?" I said, "Well, no, it's Movember." She said, "I thought you were speaking in Madison." I said, "Well, yeah." She said, "I think you should shave. You'll have more credibility." So, and then that's Pete Henschel and I at Lambeau Field. That was the coldest day of my life. We went there to watch the Packers and the Vikings play, and that's the last thing I'll say about that game. And then those are my daughter Claire, son Joe, daughter Maggie, and then my wife and I. I'm the fat guy on the right side. So thanks. Thanks for that. So, first of all, leadership is relevant. You can apply it to your own life, and so can the people that you lead. And I want to share with you a story, an experience that I call my A-team, B-team story. I was a young up-and-comer in the investment business, a couple of years into my career at Investment Advisors. The culture at II was typical of so many investment management firms. We used to work half days, whichever 12-hour period you wanted. And late one afternoon, my boss came walking into my office. It was a Monday afternoon, and he said, "Andy, I need you to come with me to a client meeting this evening." Well, in addition to being an investment professional, I was also a father and a husband. And on Monday nights, I was a small group leader in a Bible study fellowship group up in Minneapolis. And so Monday nights were off limits, and my boss knew this my commitment, yet he wanted to test my commitment to the firm, so he said, "I need you to be at this meeting." Well, this was not an important client meeting. I knew this client, and I said, "I'm not going to go." I said, "I have this previous commitment. You know I have it. I'm leading this Bible study small group, and you can handle this meeting by yourself, so just go." So the next day we were traveling to meet with another client. And we hadn't been in the car for more than a couple minutes when he turned to me and he said, "Andy," he said, "I need to know something from you." And I said, "Well, what is that?" He said, "I need to know whether you want to be an A-team player or a B-team player." And I thought, oh boy, here we go. And I said, "Well, before I can answer the question, I need to know what an A-team player and what a B-team player is." And he launched right in. He had obviously thought this through. And he said, "Listen, Andy, an A-team player is someone who always puts the firm and its clients first. Someone who would never allow their family or a Bible study to come in between what we're doing here." And he said, in addition to that, an A-team player is going to make a fabulous amount of money. That person, he said that guy, but that's not politically correct. He said that person is going to make more money than he knows what to do with, and he'll be able to buy and provide everything for his family. Okay. He said, now a B-team player is someone kind of like you, who will not put the family first, who puts other things in his life before the business, and who would turn down a client meeting to go to a Bible study, of all things. Said that person is probably not going to do very well. They're going to struggle along. but you're not going to become successful in this firm, and you probably won't last here very long. He said, so which one do you want to be? Well, you know those little hairs on the back of your neck? Mine were all standing up at this point. And I said to him, I said, well, I'll tell you what. I said, I guess if those are my choices, I'm going to have to be a B-team player. Because I married my wife because I wanted to be with her. We had children so that I could participate in raising them and be their father. And I said I joined a Bible study for balance in my life because my faith is important to me. And I said I will never allow this firm to come between those things and me. And so if it means I have to be a B-team player, I'm a B-team player. We had about a 2-hour drive to our meeting. He didn't talk to me the whole rest of the way. Didn't talk to me for quite a long time after that. I just went about my business. And within a couple of years, I was the largest producer in the firm, by the grace of God. And I walked into him after the biggest year that anybody in the firm had ever had. I'd raised $89 million in 1 year for the firm. And I said to him, how do you feel about my Bible study now? And he looked at me and he said, I don't care if you want to sacrifice chickens as long as you keep doing these numbers. Yeah. Very interesting thing. So the second thing is leadership is relevant, or leadership is real. It's first of all relevant. Secondly, it's real. It speaks the truth in the last 10%. Saying no to a client meeting to act on a higher priority is one form of leadership. But putting your career on the line is another. I have a life motto that I've developed over the last 30 years, and that is do the right thing and let the chips fall where they may. Let me share with you where that came from. I survived the A-team, B-team test, and as I told you, I eventually became a significant producer in the firm. Also, since I was known at the firm as the religious one, whenever somebody needed to be terminated, they would ask me to do it. Because for some funny reason, I would gently let people go and they wouldn't sue us. So I heard later that I was called the hatchet man by the senior people in the firm, and they didn't tell me that to my face. But I was the go-to guy whenever somebody needed to go. And one day they came and asked me to terminate a guy who was exactly my age, my same station in life. He had a wife, 2 kids, and a pregnant wife, 2 kids. I had a pregnant wife, 2 kids. And he rubbed senior management the wrong way. I didn't particularly like him either, okay? But he had done everything he'd been asked to do. And I was asked to make something up to fire him so that we could save severance. Well, the problem with being 32 years old in the first half of your career is, and when you're overpaid like I was, and I knew I wasn't worth what they were paying me, or I was afraid I wasn't, and I was afraid somebody'd figure it out, and so I was afraid to say no whenever I was asked to do something. Okay, so they asked me to fire this guy, and so when you let someone go, as you know, in a bigger company, it's a process. You've got inside lawyers, outside lawyers, HR people, everybody involved. So the morning comes when I'm going to do this. And I am shaving, standing in front of the mirror, and all of a sudden I say, this little voice inside of me says, you know, Andy, Jesus didn't die on the cross for you to go do what you're going to do. This isn't right. And I was just, I knew, you know, everybody's heard that little voice. I don't know whether it was what I ate the night before or what, but I was just like, oh no, I can't do this. This is wrong. But I finished shaving, get ready for work, drive downtown to Minneapolis, I parked at a certain parking ramp, and I pull in my car, and right next to me at 10 minutes after 7 on a Tuesday morning is another friend of mine that pulls in that I haven't seen in like 7 or 8 years. He had no business being downtown on that day, let alone in that parking lot at that exact time. I get out of the car, he gets out of the car, he goes, Andy, I can't believe I'm running into you. And I'm like, I can't believe I'm running into you. He goes, how are you? I said, I'm fine. And as any good friend would, he steps in front of me, puts a hand on my shoulder and said, I asked you, how are you? And I just dumped the truck. I was like, oh, Tim, I'm horrible. Let me tell you what's going on. I've got this, I'm going to go fire this guy that doesn't deserve to be fired, and I don't know what to do. And he put his other hand on my other shoulder, and he looked me square in the eye, and he said, well, he said, you need to do the right thing and let the chips fall where they may. And he said, I'll talk to you later, and walked away. And so I walk to the office. We go to the meeting, and we're there with the inside attorneys and the outside attorneys, and everybody's around. This is a senior guy we're going to let go, and so it's very orchestrated. You're being very careful doing this. And I felt like in the movie The Godfather, if you've ever seen that, I felt like the guy, the button man, I was the last one to talk. And it came around to me, and I said, there's only one problem with this. I said, I'm not going to do it. I said, this is a sham. He's done everything we've asked him to do, and it's not right, and I won't be a part of it. And at that point, the general counsel of the firm, who was at the other end of the long table, stood up and looked at me and said, do you think we pay you to think? Do you think we pay you the kind of money we pay you to make your own decisions? You're going to do exactly what we tell you to do. I said, no, I'm not. I said, I won't do it. It's not right. Got very quiet in that room. The meeting came to an end. I walked into my office, picked up the phone, called my wife and said, Lou, I've never been in this position before, but I just felt like I needed to call you and tell you that I think I just made a career-limiting decision. I don't know where this is going to go, but this is what happened. She said, good for you. She said, good for you. So the next morning, I got to the office, and I found out that wasn't my office anymore. I'd been relieved of all of my management responsibilities, taken out of the deferred compensation pool, taken out of the bonus pool, and the CFO of the firm came 5 minutes later, stopped by my office and said, stood there and looked at me, and I said, what can I do for you? He said, I just wanted to see the dumb 4-letter word that starts with F that just flushed $3 million down the table, down the toilet, just to stand on principle. And he turned around and left. And later on that afternoon, somebody else fired that guy anyway. And so anyway, 3 months later, I started Cornerstone Capital Management. The stone that the builders have rejected has become the cornerstone, and those who trust in him will not be put to shame. And so that was 25 years ago, and $16 billion. When I left IAI that day, we had $14 billion in management. And when I left that firm, the CEO told me I'd never amount to anything and my career was over. So, to God be the glory. Anyway, so leadership is real, it's relevant. Thirdly, it's relational. So, what I learned is the biggest person that you got to lead in this in the business world and in life is yourself. And I'm the toughest person for me to lead because I'm so stubborn and I want to have my own way all the time, even if I'm wrong. Let me give you just another little anecdote. I told you that I commuted for 5 years back and forth from Minneapolis to New York. We had 22 people in our Minneapolis office, one investment team. That was the firm that I founded. But in New York, we had 2 investment teams, a trading operation, and some operational folks, 47 people out there. And New York is really it's the center of the investment world in this country. Many people say it's the center of the investment universe. And so everything was happening there, and we'd go back and forth, but it was wonderful to be able to come back to Minneapolis every Thursday night or sometimes Wednesday night and have a couple days of quiet in Minneapolis. It's a nice thing. But so I'm every week for 5 years I'm in New York, and one day in May, beautiful day, I'm walking up Fifth Avenue, and I'm standing at the corner right by St. Patrick's Cathedral. And if you've been there, it's beautiful, and it was just one of those pristine New York days, which you get about 3 or 4 of them a year. I'm awful glad, based on what happened yesterday, I'm awful glad I'm not there because just that kind of stuff is just awful, just rattles. But anyway, I'm standing on the corner of Fifth Avenue and St. Patrick's Cathedral. I think it's 53rd or maybe 52nd. Anyway, I look up and here's this guy that I graduated from high school with that I haven't seen in like 15, 20 years. And only in New York. You know, he lives a mile from me in Minneapolis, and I never see him, and I go to New York, and there he is. And Matt, hi. Andy, hi. So he goes, what are you doing here? I go, well, my company, we have an office here. So really? He said, what company are you with? I said, it's called Cornerstone Capital Management. He goes, Cornerstone Capital Management? He goes, I was just there. I just had a meeting with the head international portfolio manager and his senior analyst. I said, oh, you did? I said, who was it that you met with? He said, well, you probably wouldn't know them. They're probably very senior to you. It was Eddie Ramos and his team. But he goes, do you know him? I go, yeah, as a matter of fact, I met with him this morning. I said, well, why would you be meeting with him? I said, well, he's one of my direct reports, and we meet once a week. He goes, well, what do you do at Cornerstone? I said, I'm the CEO. He takes a step back, looks at me, and goes, how did you ever become the CEO? I said, really, I got here first. Happened to found the firm, and so I said, Matt, I couldn't probably qualify for the job today. But anyway, so those kind of, lot of those fun things happen. But I want to take a step back now. I'm sensitive to your time. I've told you that I've learned that without leadership, nothing happens, and leadership is real, it's relevant, and it's relational. And the hardest person to lead is usually yourself. It is in my case. But I want to take a step back and tell you a little bit of how I got to where I got a long time ago. Should tell you the rest of the story. So I am the youngest of 4 kids in my family. I'm 13 years younger than my oldest sister, 10 years younger than my next sister, and 8 years younger than my brother. We came from a very modest family in Minneapolis. modest financially. And there were two things that were really held up and honored when I was growing up. Wealth. I'm convinced wealth was because we didn't have it, and my parents admired people who were wealthy and had lived the American dream and been successful. And the other one was athletic ability. My brother, who was 8 years older than me, was a 12 letterman at the University of at West High School in Minneapolis. That means that he lettered in 3 varsity sports 4 years in a row, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th. He was one of 3 individuals in the 100-year history of that high school to become a 12 letterman. My dad was the first one. Also, in addition to being a great athlete, he was a scholar, and his athletic ability won him the notice of Harvard, who was building at the time a national championship hockey team, and he got approached by Harvard and ended up going there. As an aside, because we're here, you all know when I say the name Bob Johnson, you know who that is, Badger Bob. He was my uncle. And so my brother was given, there were 10 WCHA hockey teams in his senior year in high school, and he was given 9 full scholarship WCHA offers. The only school that didn't give him an offer was Wisconsin, and that's because he was Bob's nephew, and he couldn't give a scholarship to a family member. But he wanted him to come and play. And that's really the only one that was thought about. He thought about 2 things. I remember Herb Brooks standing in our living room talking to my parents and Wiz, and then I remember coming down here to take a tour of all the hockey stuff with Bob. And so Wiz thought about being a Gopher, a Badger, and then ultimately went out to Harvard. And he went there because he thought he could get the best education there. And so the only problem was in the spring of my junior year, my dad sat me down at the kitchen table and said, "Andy," said, "Harvard has been way more expensive than we had ever imagined. And instead of taking all of the college fund, or some of the college fund, it took it all. So you're going to be on your own." This is a hard thing for a 16-year-old kid, 17-year-old kid to hear. And sort of an anger started growing in me. It was a little bit before this time that both the varsity hockey and varsity football coaches at my high school came up to me and told me how disappointed they were that I wasn't the athlete my brother had been. They had hoped that that would happen, and it didn't. And so I was going to be on my own. I chose to come to Wisconsin because it was reciprocal, same price as Minnesota, and it was 4 hours. I think it actually took a little longer to get down here back then, but I could be away from home. And so I came down here with one goal in mind, and I'm embarrassed to tell you this, but I will tell you. I wanted to be the richest guy in the world. I honestly believed I could do it, and I thought it would matter if I did. I was foolish enough to believe it would matter if I did. And I had that driving desire to become wealthy because I wasn't an athlete and my family respected wealth. And so I wanted them to respect me like they did my athletic brother. And anyway, I came down here, and I wasn't here too long before I met a guy, a 30-year-old guy who'd made $1 million in an Amway business. And I had a cup of coffee with him, and I thought to myself when I left, I thought, if this guy could make $1 million in this, I could make 10. And so I got involved. And for the next several years, I loved things and used people. And I like to say that my motivation in life, I had 3 motivations: money, power, and sex. My fraternity brothers at Madison had the same three motivations, but in a different order. But I was first and foremost a capitalist, and I reasoned that if I had money and power, I could get all of number 3 I wanted. So I went on my way, and I built my business, and as I said, I used people and loved things. Until February of my junior year, a woman came up to me and she said, "I'm pregnant, Andy. It's your child, and I'm going to have an abortion." And this was not part of my plan. And so I gave her $250, and one of her girlfriends drove her to the clinic, and she had an abortion. And so my problems were solved, or so I thought. Till the next morning, I was shaving, standing in front of the mirror, and I looked at the face of a murderer. And I felt something that I'd never felt before, just a deep conviction and just an emptiness and a what is the point of this life type feeling. And I reasoned that if I continued to work, if I worked harder, if I got more stuff, I could take care of that feeling. And so I doubled down on everything I was doing. And it went great. That part of my life went great. And then about 8 months later, I'm at a National Amway convention in Kansas City. It was September 12th, 1982. It was a Sunday. And one of the things, I haven't had any involvement with the Amway Corporation really since that time, but one of the things I respect is they're very family-oriented, and so they would put on a worship service because their meetings would take you away from your home on Sunday. And so, but I was not a man of faith. I didn't trust anybody who had faith. I thought you were weak if you did. And I was traveling with these 3 guys, and they said, "We're going to this worship service." I said, "Fine, pick me up afterwards. I'll be at the Hyatt." They said, "No, we're not coming back. You've got to come with us." I said, "All right, that's fine." And that's the day I found out God has a sense of humor, because it was 105 degrees in Kansas City. I would have died in the car where I had planned to wait. So I went into the Kansas City Coliseum with the Sunday newspaper, I'm sure the sports section. And I went to the top of the Kansas City Coliseum, and doesn't look too much different than any of these coliseums around here, and sat there and listened when this guy, Mac Evans, came up and started talking. And he started talking about being lost in your life and wanting to start your life again and having an empty feeling. And I was really uncomfortable, because he was telling my life story to about 12,000 people. I didn't know how this guy knew everything about me. And he said, there is a way that you can start your life over again. He said, as a matter of fact, that emptiness that you feel because you're separated from God. And that emptiness is called sin. And I don't know, 21 years old, I'd never even heard the word sin before. I probably had, but it bounced right off me, because I'd certainly done enough of it. I was a professional at it. And he said, there is a way. You have to do something. Someone's got to pay for that sin. Someone's got to pay that price. Someone's got to bridge that gap between you and God. And I love this. I love this card that I just saw here today that's on your table, because this is exactly what the guy talked about. And so he said, if you'd like to start your life again, come down here to this stage and accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. Accept that he paid the penalty for your sin, and you can start your life all over again. Guys, to this day, I don't remember going from the top row of the Kansas City Coliseum. I was the first one down there, standing, looking at his feet, just crying like a baby. That was the day I got to begin my life again. And that was the day that set everything in motion, good and bad, that that allowed me to make the decisions I made, the A-team, B-team decision, to do the right thing and let the chips fall where they may. And then be standing here today. And it's a great thing. If you would have ever told me that all these years later, 30-some years later, I would come back to Madison and talk to a group like this, I would have thought you were crazy. Here we are. And so, without leadership, nothing happens. I just want to ask you 3 questions for you to think about. Where do you stand today? Where do you stand today? Have you made that decision? Do you have that feeling like you'd like to start your life over again? And if you do, are you willing to trust Christ with your life? And so I'm going to close in prayer quickly, and I'm going to say a little prayer. And if you're that person, and I prayed this morning when I was driving down here, I said, Lord, if there's one guy here that needs to hear this, it's worth the trip for me. It's worth me to spend a whole day if there's one guy here. So I don't know who you are, and I'll leave here and probably never talk to you again or see you again. But a lot of these guys in this room will love to help you. So I'm going to just close in prayer today, and if you're that guy, you could just pray along with me. You know, God doesn't care about your posture when you're praying. He just cares about the attitude of your heart. So would you join me? Father, thank you for these guys here today. Thank you for this Leading with Power ministry. It is your power and your leading that brings us here. And Lord, I just want to pray along with the one guy that doesn't know you today that would like to bridge that gap, Lord. Thank you that you came and paid the penalty for our sins. And that if we confess with our mouth and believe in our heart that Jesus is Lord, we will be saved. Lord, if there's a man here today that needs to pray that prayer and is praying it right now, just confirm that to him. And be glorified today. Thank you for these men. Bless them as we go away. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you.